Robin, welcome to the Business Karaoke podcast. How are you in almost a COVID-free Australia? How is it?
Yeah. Well, as we were saying just before we started recording, I after 25 years of living in Tokyo, my family and I moved back to Sydney, where I'm from, in January this year. So like just over 4 months ago, and yeah, it's taking time to kind of reintegrate. I think back into my
Yeah.
former place of living. It's a challenge, but it's great. I mean, as you mentioned, the COVID situation is largely under control. I mean, life is pretty much
hmm
just people are just living normally here.
hmm
There's very few restrictions in place, but yeah, it's a challenge.
Yeah, I can. Just on this point, I couldn't agree more with you because for me, people often talk about culture shock, and culture shock is not Japanese people eat a whole lot of rice or German people are really punctual. Culture shock is where's my significance in this community, right? And your significance has been so much in a different community. And so this community is new. And so I can't wait to jump into that. But kind of before we jump in, talk a little bit about your journey of creating Zensho. I originally reached out to you because I listened or I was learning about that you created this kind of new kind of style of business. And I was so interested to learn about it. Of course, you don't have to begin there. Maybe the story needs a little bit more context. But before we jump into kind of like the more direct questions, give us a little bit more context as to, what kind of playing field we're talking on here.
Yeah, wonderful. So it's been an interesting journey, and
Yeah.
that's probably the core message or the core thing I've learned is it really is a journey, and like any journey, there's ups and downs. And
hmm
I moved to Japan in 1996 with the idea of staying there for about 6 months, like so many others. And I was working in advertising. Used to work for a big
Uh-huh.
ad agency called
hmm
DDB in Sydney. I was doing that for about 3.5, 4 years.
hmm
And I started, I've been doing martial arts my entire life. And one of the martial arts I was really into was this Japanese art, commonly referred to as ninjutsu. The more official title is the
Ah.
Bujinkan or Bujinkan Budo Taijutsu. I can tell you more about
hmm
that later.
hmm
But I went over to Japan to
hmm
with the idea of learning from the top teachers for say
Uh-huh.
6 months and having a bit of fun and teaching
hmm
English while I'm there, with the idea of coming back to my advertising job.
hmm
Anyway, that 6 months turned into 3 years, then 5 years, then 10 years, then 15 years, and then ultimately 25 years. During, after about 2.5 years on the ground in Japan, I realized I'm not going home anytime soon, or this was
hmm
becoming my home.
hmm
And so I thought, well, I better get back into a business type of job. I was having fun teaching
mm
English during the day, training in the evenings,
mm
but realizing I was going to stay there longer, I thought better to get back into business. At the time, my Japanese language skills were fairly minimal, so I didn't have the necessary fluency to go back
hmm
into advertising. And I saw an ad for a recruitment firm, a large recruitment firm that was looking for new recruiters. Having been recruited once in my advertising career, I thought it seems interesting. I'll give it a
hmm
shot. I got the job at this company and I worked there for about 3 years, fell in love with recruitment, and in 2003 left to start my own firm called Zensho Agency, actually co-founded with one of my colleagues. And we started off as this little boutique, this little
mm
legal specialist boutique. So just
hmm
focusing on working with international,
hmm
mostly US or UK law firms,
hmm
investment banks, large multinationals who are looking for either Japanese or foreign lawyers, generally for the Tokyo operations. It's such a niche area, a very
Yeah.
small area, but very competitive as well. And we we started in 2003, and we remained as a small legal focused
hmm
boutique recruitment firm from 2003 till about 2015. And there's
hmm
lots of up and downs on there, which I can share with you if you're interested. But um, around 2013, I started thinking, and I was hearing a lot of dissatisfaction in the recruitment industry amongst senior recruiters like myself. People weren't loving
mm
it anymore. They weren't. The industry was turning into a real mechanical science, and it was losing the art. It was losing the
hmm
soul, I felt, and people were just not happy with the direction things are going, it was becoming very KPI driven, all about how many resumes you send and how many meetings you set, etc. In addition to that, the world was changing, and the concept of work and where you work, how you work was changing, largely due to advances in social media and technology.
Right.
But I saw the shift happening globally. And, if you go back to the Industrial Revolution, where all the power, all the work is centralized in the factory or in the office, and was talent going out in search of work.
Right.
It seemed that was unraveling. We saw this decentralization, it was now work going out in search of talent. Look at the Ubers and the Airbnbs of the world. And I thought recruitment is so ripe. It's an industry that's so ripe for this change. It was about, to use an overused quote, to put the power back to the people. The individual mattered again. And I really was passionate about that. And I saw this happening in many areas, except my own industry of recruitment. So that got me really thinking about, okay, how can we reinvent? How can we reimagine this whole paradigm, this whole recruitment paradigm? Not so much from the perspective of the client or the candidate, but from the recruiter themselves. The recruiter is the person, the consultant is the person who generates all the relationships, generates the deals, the revenue. And typically they were getting paid a small part of the pie, and they were doing all the work. And it just didn't make sense. Didn't make sense to me. I think it made sense 20 years ago, the brick and mortar thing and all of that, but things were changing. And I could talk about this for hours and I won't, but to cut a long story short, I got a lot of inspiration from the US real estate brokerage industry, particularly in New York. I found that some of the top brokerages were attracting the best agents, and all these agents were typically independent contractors. And they received the lion's share of the revenue they generated. And they even paid a monthly desk fee or monthly fee to the brokerage in return for access to the platform, all the apps, all the back office services and accounting, and even coaching and things like that. So I thought, could this work in recruitment? Could this work in Japan? And everyone I asked told me, no way, not a chance.
Of course not,
Japan's
Robin.
too conservative.
無理、難しい、難しい、難しい。
Yeah. What's that thing? The nail that sticks out will be hammered down. And, stop trying to change something that's not necessarily broken. But I thought it was broken. I thought it was close to shattering and really needed some fresh infusion of creative ideas. And anyway, so I spent like 8 months, like a crazed madman, working on compensation plans and ideas to restructure my business, which had 3 people at the time, both the other 2 being my employees. And they were on a typical monthly salary plus commission package, which was commensurate with the rest of the industry. And I finally felt like I had something to share. And I went to my 2 existing employees and I said, guys, this is the new direction for Zensho. If you want to stay on the old plan, that's fine, but this is going to be the new plan. We're going to broaden outside of the legal area, go into all the other areas, tech, manufacturing, finance, etc. And we're going to hire more people, but they're going to be hired in this way, a very different way. And my 2 existing employees were like, screw the old plan, we want to be on the new plan. So we launched this new paradigm, and it spread like wildfire through the industry. And what some people thought was a crazy experiment, we went from 3 people in October 2015 to our current 35 people. And we have 3 people on the ground now in London, where we launched earlier this year. And we're looking to do the same very potentially here in Australia as well. And it's working, and it's making a difference. I mean, I know I'm yapping on here, but I'm just going with it.
No, Robin, this is exactly, you're being the perfect guest. This is exactly what we want for business character guests.
You can shut me up, or just tell me to shut up whenever you need to interject. But it's what I really wanted to do. Most recruitment firms, most professional services firms, whether that be law firms, consulting firms, recruitment firms, they were looking at it as, in terms of how they pay their consultants. How little can I pay you and still keep you? That's the kind of mentality that I saw happening. And I wanted to flip that around. How much can I pay you and still be a profitable business? And from that position, everything else came. And I should preface that with the first thing I really sat down with before we looked at compensation plans, before I thought about new directions,
Right.
was really to understand my why. What is my why? What is my
Mhm.
purpose?
Mhm.
And it starts there,
Mhm.
because once you understand that, everything else falls into place. And for me, every professional services firm, their mission statement, their vision statement is some derivative of, we exist to help our clients succeed. There's nothing wrong with
Mhm.
that. That's a great mission statement. But to me, it doesn't really get buy-in. It doesn't. It wasn't authentic in many cases.
Mhm.
And I looked at what is the why of Zensho, and Zensho Agency's why is very simple. We exist as a platform through which our people can
Mhm.
pursue and achieve the things that are important to them. So my
Mhm.
35 people are my clients. My job is to help
Right.
them succeed. And if I can help them succeed, they will do a fantastic job for the clients and the candidates that they serve. And that's
Mm.
that's that's a well, I wouldn't say it's concise, but that's a snapshot of how we got to where we currently are, and what was the underlying principle driving that
Mm.
change, and what continues to drive our expansion.
Mhm. No, Robin, that really does, I think, give people context as to where this is, where it came from, and I think it creates many springboards for us that we can kind of jump into. Um,
Mm,
uh, and I guess I'd like to almost begin a little bit earlier into that martial arts journey that you mentioned. Um, Recently, or very similar in kind of the vein that you began Zensho, is that I'm also very interested from other industries. It could be anything from, maybe it's stand-up comedy or entertainment, maybe it's the restaurant business, maybe it's mobility, maybe it's something completely different, just to learn from other people and their experiences and their journeys. And I was recently listening to a martial arts athlete. I don't know what I think they're called athletes, or a martial artist. And he was talking about the idea of playfulness in the ring. And the reason he talked about being playful in the ring is, or when you're sparring in the ring, is because when you walk into a fight with that do or die mindset, like I have to win this, or my life is dependent on it, then you're less likely to take risks. And for me, this was such an interesting way to frame things, because in innovation, which is the area that I work in, we always talk about being playful and creative, but it wasn't until he mentioned it in that context that I thought, yeah, that's exactly why. I felt why, but I wasn't able to really maybe articulate it until he did in that way, which was, when you can be creative, when you can be open and you can see different perspectives. For example, like you did, that you saw, for example, you were inspired by the real estate brokerages in America. Could this work in Japan? You had that could, maybe, this idea of playfulness. And I think that has been such an important message for me, is that something that we even learned from sport is this idea of being creative, being playful on the off times when you can afford it. I'm not saying, go and, do crazy things when you really do have those do or die moments, because we all have those. But when you have the off moments, be creative, because maybe it's in that moment you might see something, hear something, connect with someone unusual, and it might inspire you for your business. But I can imagine that maybe there are many other lessons from your martial arts journey that maybe, that birthed Zensho into where it is today. Is there anything else that maybe comes to mind that was particularly martial arts related?
Yeah, Brittany, I love that you just talked about that word play and being playful, because I am such a huge believer in that. I think it was Einstein who said play is the highest form of, and what does he mean by that? To play is, it's something we associate with children, right? When we talk about playing,
Right.
and as an adult, you're not supposed to play. You're supposed to take everything so seriously. And I mean, taking things so seriously, particularly in business, is so damn boring. I mean, creativity comes from play.
Mm-hmm.
What I found, and particularly from a martial arts context, and interestingly, the grandmaster of the ninjutsu tradition that I studied for so long and continue to study, he would always, after showing a technique, he would shout, in English, he would shout, play, go and play. And he's not saying be childish
Mm.
or be immature or be childlike. He's talking about this idea of play. When we play, we can step outside of ourselves. We step
Mm-hmm.
outside of our story.
Mm-hmm.
And what's been really
Mm-hmm.
interesting for me is how closely related the principles of martial arts and philosophy are with the
Mm.
principles of business and entrepreneurship. And this
Mm-hmm.
idea of narrative, this idea of story that we construct in our mind about the way things are, the way things should be. And it's usually some result of our conditioning, our environment, our experiences, our conditioning since childhood, all the factors that go into kind of weaving together this narrative that I say is me, and this is my relationship with the world. And martial arts is a really wonderful way of kind of unraveling, of deconstructing that narrative and getting beyond the story, getting outside the story and becoming much more engaged with life as it actually is, being engaged with reality as it is, not as we think it should be or would want it to be, but actually how it is. And I found that through martial arts training and this idea of play, you're able to be much more present. And when you're present to what's actually happening, it allows you to respond. And this is very, very applicable to the martial arts world, of course. You have to respond to what's happening. If you're fighting someone in the ring and you're thinking, well, if he does this with the right hand, I'll do this and I'll do that. What happens if he does something else all of a sudden? So you have to be totally present. Yeah. Otherwise, instead of responding to what's happening, you are reacting from your story. You're reacting from your fears, your insecurities, your hopes, your desires. And that's, for me, a less effective, a less spontaneous, a less a less creative way to engage with what's happening, whether it's business, martial arts, or life in general. I think it's much more authentic to just be present to what's actually arising. And you'll find it takes less effort and it resonates. People resonate with authenticity. It's not a tool. You don't use authenticity. You don't, I think I'll act authentic in this meeting. No, it's not something you apply. It's just something you are. It's a state of being. I know, I love all this stuff. I talk about this stuff.
This is why I asked you. This is why I asked you on. Exactly. When we talked about, you mentioned that at the beginning when you first introduced this kind of new way of working, that there was kind of resistance. I found that when Japanese companies or clients tend to say no, it's not N-O, it's K-N-O-W, which means I don't know enough. So I've found that when you hear no in Japan, it replace N-O for K-N-O-W, which means I don't know you well enough. I don't understand the concept well enough. So you really have to do work in trying to to get people to see kind of the output. But at the same time, when you're working, with limited resources, you're a team of now 35, but at the end of the day, Japan is still quite a large market. So I could imagine that you could grow your company by 1,000 people, 3,000 people, and you still would have, not enough hands to do all the work that needs to be done. But if we think about how does one begin in that kind of environment where you're getting the no, and how do you find people who say yes? How did you get those initial people on board? Was it simply kind of showing them the value of the company, or what were some of the things that you did to create that new talent to take a chance on you, really, and that they said yes, Robin, we're going to come and join you?
Yeah, wonderful question. And certainly my immense gratitude and towards the people who first came on board. I mean, really to anyone who comes on board, because it required an incredible amount of belief in themselves, a belief in me, obviously, and a belief in the concept. And it's not easy. And we have Japanese consultants, of course, as well, but particularly for the non-Japanese consultants on the ground in Tokyo, and to move to a platform that was largely untested and, that takes a lot of courage. And I'll always appreciate those people who came on board. They gave it everything and they continued to do so every day. I think what I tried to do when I was having those initial conversations and conversations I still have with recruiters, it's interesting. I hear the same stories all the time. And it's even with recruiters I know who could potentially thrive on our platform and get their lives back again. We like to say, with us, you're in business for yourself, but not by yourself. There's such a tribe, such a community around you. Yeah, we're not a bunch of. Even though our consultants are independent contractors in the the technical sense, they're not we're not a bunch of cowboys and cowgirls running around just doing our own thing,
There's a
sharing a brand.
community.
It's not
Yeah,
that.
there's a
There's
community.
the strength, the pillar is our community. It's our culture. And I think that's been the biggest challenge and really the opportunity for us. And it's really our USP. It's our culture. Our compensation plan is tremendous. And it's the best in the market. And it's what gets people's attention, but it's just numbers. Anyone could copy those numbers tomorrow.
Yeah,
It's the
that's
culture.
right.
That's our DNA. That's, I think, by some definition, that's not easily replicable. And our culture is where we invest the most time. Our values, we start with our why. What comes from that as our values. We have very clear values that help guide us in decision making, particularly when there's some issues arising, and so the values are really, really important. And then, of course, on top of that, we have our general policies and so on. But back to your question, it was when I would talk with people, I would obviously share the vision of what Zensho is, why Zensho is, and that was really where I put my focus. And I really wanted people to ask themselves what their own why is, what's important to them. And it might be people with families who want more time, people who want to make more investments, they want more money, whatever that might be. I wanted to really understand what each person's why is, and how could Zensho's collective why incorporate that person's individual why. And so I spent a lot of time with each person I spoke to make sure that they were clear on what their why was. And to be clear, I never find, when someone's why is just to make as much money as they can, I've never found that to be effective. I've never found that to be
Effective
something that's going to be fulfilling. Yeah, it's never, making money is a result. It's a result of what you do. And it's never your why. It's not the thing that drives you. And you find that in most cases, people's whys haven't changed since childhood. There's something, how they live it, how they pursue it, obviously changes as you grow up and through different professions. But that innate driving force, which really propels you forward in life and helps you get back on your feet again, that's something that usually starts in adolescence and stays with you as you grow up. So speaking with people about what it is that they want to achieve in life, and then really seeing how Zensho can support them on their journey, and appreciating that when they join us, they're joining our community, and they may not stay with us forever, and that's okay. If we can contribute to a stage on their journey, then that's fantastic. And they're contributing to a stage on Zensho's journey. We're this kind of this living organism that's always being developed and enriched, and by the diverse people that join us. And that's what keeps things very fresh and very new and alive. And it's really wonderful. We have people from, God, I don't know, 15, maybe 12 different nationalities in the business, male, female, all different types with different ideas, different characters, different whys. And yet somehow we have this wonderful community of harmony. It's largely harmonious, which is very rare in the recruiting world. People genuinely care about each other, and I totally haven't answered your question. I think I've gone off on some tangent, but
No.
please bring me back if
At least once during an episode, somebody said, "Sorry, I think that was a tangent." And the Business Karaoke podcast is all about tangents. But one thing that came to mind when I'm seeing this I'm envisioning this incredibly colorful kind of office with different people and ideas and values and but still all contributing to kind of like that one common goal. One challenge I often hear from really highly talented foreign professionals in Japan is they feel like they can't contribute like they used to, and let's put that kind of like in quotation marks. That they said that it's either the environment, maybe it's they don't speak Japanese and well enough, or maybe it's the environment or a boss or a particular system. And they often say, I feel like I'm not contributing kind of like I used to. How do you ensure, or what are some of the things that you do, and it might not necessarily be one thing, maybe it's a kind of a mix of things, that Zensho does for your employees that they can contribute all in their own different ways?
Yeah, good question. So one of the things, all of my consultants are partners, and so the one thing we really stress is everyone's voice is encouraged, is invited, is respected, and it's heard. And we have a very flat organization. We don't have the typical hierarchy that you might see in usual places. Everyone's equal, everyone. And transparency is one of the key things that we value. And so no one tells another person what to do. We have really, really collaborative discussions, and we encourage people to share ideas. We have best practice workshops. We have coaching. I'm also a certified coach, and where applicable or where people want it, I'm always happy to be more like a mirror, to sit down with people and help guide them on their journey. Where do they want to go with their practice? What do they want to achieve? And we often put together little groups in terms of, we call them labs, these labs where we'll come online together and we'll discuss a certain aspect of the recruitment business or life or whatever. And we try to encourage different people, because everyone's got value to offer. Everyone's got experience to share. And we want to, as much as possible, solicit feedback and information and knowledge from people, so they can share that with the rest of the tribe, so we can all learn from that. So people, one of the things that's important to me is a typical organization. People's progress are measured externally. It comes from outside of themselves. It's a manager telling, you've been a good boy or a good girl.
You've done
now
a good
you're
job
this,
or not.
this,
yeah.
This is, now you're this title, and this title has a bit more money, etc., etc. And we start to measure our progress based on that feedback from outside of us. And but I think genuine, authentic development has to come from within. And I think you are your best measure of how you're progressing. And it's not something that comes from outside. That's always artificial and someone else's idea. And you are the best judge of how you're growing. So I want to create an environment where people can exercise their ability to develop and to grow. And we encourage that tremendously, because the more people grow personally within, for themselves, and we bring that into the community, our entire community grows. And what we see is such a knock-on benefit to those that we serve, the clients and the candidates that we serve. And clients are actually really loving our story. They're loving the fact that our consultants can authentically say to them, Mr. and Mrs. Client, I report to you. I don't have to report to some hierarchy back in the office. I'm free, I'm independent, I'm compensated greatly, so I can delve deeply into your business. I don't have to spread myself so thin to make ends meet. I don't have to do things in a way that makes my manager happy. I can do things the way that will work for you. And back to your earlier question, which I completely avoided, I think. You said, when someone says no, or how do we get around that? And I find when I talk with recruiters about Zensho, those who I feel could have a good track record and could thrive with us, the biggest hurdle to overcome is always a mental one. It's always this idea of fear or insecurity. People say, I want stability, or I want, this kind of thing. But really what they're looking for is predictability. They're looking for this, and which is very different from play. And the whole idea of play is to be unpredictable. Predictable play is boring, right? Just ask any child. I mean, it's the unknown, the willingness, their level of comfort or discomfort to deal with the unknown. And that's, again, one of the beautiful things of martial arts. Martial arts is very much teaching you to respond for what happens next. It's not about, yet so much of what we do, we want to learn things that have already happened. We want to have this, we go to the gym and we want to be told, do 10 sets of this and 3 sets of that, and then add 2 kilos. We want things fixed for us. But it's a very common mindset. But the idea sometimes of not knowing can be really scary for people. But that's where, like with anything, the thing that scares us is the thing that actually liberates us. And if we can get through that hurdle and believe in ourselves and throw ourselves into it, it's amazing. Just seeing, we have one guy who joined us, his best year in revenue for the previous 2 or 3 years before he joined us was about 25 million yen, which is about $250,000, which is good, respectable. But his first full year with us, he made, I think it was $900,000 US revenue. And I say that not just to boast about the numbers, but to show when he was given platform where he could grow, where he could
Mm.
do things the way he knew how to do them, where he was free to work with his clients and candidates. We had the support network, the community, the information sharing, all of that, all happening in the right place. He was able to fly. And that's really what we're trying to do. And I think the main thing when we're talking with clients or anyone or anything in sales, really, if people are saying no, it's usually, like you said, it's not no, it's usually means we haven't done a good enough job yet of explaining the value, the benefit from the client's perspective. Too often in sales, people are saying, our product is this, or our service does this, and we are so good. Look at this award and blah, 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 blah. But you've always got to have the idea that the customer is saying, so what? What does that mean for me? What does that mean for my business? And you've got to put it in their terms, from their perspective. Otherwise, it's just sales talk.
Yeah, exactly. Any kind of good practice, like we know from martial arts or whether it's anything else, comes with having good days and having bad days. And I could imagine that Zensho, which is now a place where people can grow and there's this platform and a community of people who are really being their best selves, I can imagine that maybe the journey to building what it is today maybe had some ups and downs and maybe some lessons in between. Can you share with us a little bit about that? What got you to, what were some of those lessons, or maybe it was even just some of those stories that got you to having these very clear convictions to, hey, this is what people need because we did this other thing before and that was a disaster. Any moments stand out?
I mean, there's been like I said earlier, like any journey, there's been ups and downs. I think when we launched Zensho in 2003, we were almost bankrupt within the first 4 weeks.
Oh, gee.
And that was scary. And then we were almost bankrupt again about, I don't know, 5 years later. And I still remember, and I was married at the time. And I think my wife was pregnant with our first. So this would be going back, she was turned 12.
That's always fun.
So 12 years ago. First baby about to be born, and you look at the company bank account. I had 2 employees at the time, and it went down like this, and it got down to, I kid you not, I think it was 55 yen, so like 55 cents.
Yeah, which is cents, right, for anyone
in
else
the bank account. Yeah, I mean, nothing, right? Not enough to buy a coffee. And I knew this was coming, obviously, and I had prepared our people, and we were leaving the office space because we couldn't afford it. Things weren't happening. It was bad luck and blah blah blah. And then, obviously, we saw this coming. I knew where we're going to run out of money, and like, 2 months from now, 6 weeks from now, a week, 4 weeks from now, we're going to run out. But what helped me personally, and again, all thanks to the courage of those working with me, we kept our eyes focused on, again, being present. What can we do? What can we actually do? Yes, it doesn't mean we stick our head in the sand and pretend nothing's happening. Not that. But the more we were reacting from fear, or what could go wrong, what might go wrong, what will probably happen, that wasn't going to help. It was a very, very passive, very victim-like state. And so we thought the best way we're going to make any kind of impact here is just to be present, do what we can, respond to what's actually happening. And to long story short, I wish I had a copy of the bank book to show you. A deal happened relatively, soon after that. And there was obviously a deal that had been on in the works for several months, maybe 6 months. Yeah. But our bank book goes from 55 yen to 52.5 million yen. So say from 55 cents to $500,000.
So we can pay everyone. We can pay everyone this
We made
month.
a big team deal, and all the money came in. I was able to get the money paid faster than usual by giving the client a slight discount. We had all this money. We're able to move into a nice office again. And we were working from coffee shops for 6 months, which weirdly is now what I'm promoting. But back then we wanted the office space, and it was scary. And I remember thinking, not just myself and my pregnant wife, but I'm responsible for the livelihoods of those working with me, and they're looking to me to take care of them. And that was scary. And I had to consciously, I do a lot of meditation. The martial arts was a beautiful outlet for me. It was a place to to clear my mind. And that's, again, another beauty of martial arts, is for those 2 hours on the mat, you're completely present. You have to be. If you're thinking about problems or tonight's dinner or this problem with this person, you get punched in the face.
Yeah.
You have to be very present with what's actually happening. And so that was a story with a happy ending. Things worked out well. But look, we've had the COVID situation, and I did a little video on LinkedIn, right, probably around February last year. And when I saw all the fear that was happening with COVID, and very, very justifiably so, what I was hearing in the market were a lot of managers in other recruitment firms. They were really being quite strong on their people about, well, where's your next deal coming from, and which, blah blah blah. And I could see these companies, were with large overhead and lots of salaries paid out. They were worried about how they're going to make ends meet if the clients aren't hiring anymore due to COVID.
Right.
But what I wasn't hearing was enough of there didn't seem to be enough concern about the well-being and the welfare of their people. And something, first and foremost, what I wanted to do when COVID happened, sit down with each person and say, how are you doing?
Really? Yeah.
How are you? Okay. How's your wife? How's your husband? How's your family? They must be worried, right? You don't get a salary with us. You get a very high commission. But if you're not making a deal, then what? Then what happens?
Right.
How do you help someone get through what can be a very anxious time, particularly when they're expected to bring home money for their family and things like that?
Absolutely,
and so we did a lot of community talks, and we did a lot of one-on-one kind of discussions, and really trying. My hat off to all of our people who worked together. Maybe this person's clients were really actively hiring. So he would say to 2 or 3 colleagues, hey, help me with these roles, and how we would share the work and how we would make sure that no one got left behind. And we pulled through it, and things were having our best year we've ever had.
Incredible.
Not to say it was easy for everyone. Of course, it was challenging for everyone, but together we were stronger. And again, that's the whole point of our community. And our people are independent. They're not forced to help each other. They're not forced to like each other. So when it does happen, it's even
authentic.
more powerful, more authentic, because it's coming from them. And that's what I love to see. I get to live my why every day. My personal why is to liberate people. And it's been my why since I was a child. And how I've done that is through different pursuits, whether it's martial or business or philosophical or whatever. But I just love to help potential emerge. I love seeing that spark in people and think, you have the potential. People are so much more powerful than they give themselves credit for. And they're trapped, like we all are, by our own stories. And when you can give people, you can invite people to see beyond that, to see it like a little chink in that story, a little crack in that story. It's amazing what people can achieve. It's absolutely amazing. And again, it always starts here. Yes, you have the skills, you have to work hard. I'm not saying you just have to think it. I don't believe in that. The power of thought, incredibly powerful, but you also have to take massive action. And then you see things really can transform a person's life.
Robin, we have or the majority of our listeners are in Japan. And when we speak about this, my why, it tends to be a little bit more of like a Western concept that we talk about it. Like you can ask someone, kind of in English, hey, what's your why? But I've never really heard people say that in Japan, right? To each other, hey, what's your why? What are some things that if this kind of why conversation is very new to you, you mentioned this idea of massive action. If this idea of having your why is new, what are some of those initial steps that you would recommend that would get you closer? Maybe it's not, of course it's a journey, but what are some of those things that might get you a little bit closer today than you were yesterday to that why?
Yeah, good point. And something that I think is interesting to note is that, you might think, oh, as a parent, my why is to take care of my children, but that goes for any parent. And so that's actually not your why. Every parent, otherwise that would be everyone's why. Oh, to take care of my family or to take care of my kids. And of course, that's your responsibility. That's your joy, or that's your that's what you do as a parent. And so everyone shares that. When I talk about my why, of course, it relates to my purpose. What's my purpose? What's the thing that, regardless of how I'm expressing it, regardless of what my job is or or even where I am on my life journey, what's the thing that is consistently pushing me forward? What's that innate desire I have that influences the major decisions I make in life, whether that be relationship or vocational, with work, whatever it might be, travel, anything. There's something usually that is, I'm making a decision. Maybe it's very subconscious, but I'm making a decision based on this drive inside me. And when you can identify what that is, that's usually what we call your why. That's the thing that will help you get back up again when you fall down. It's the thing that will help you decide this way or that way. It's the thing when everything goes wrong, and it usually does in many parts of our journey, right? It's a thing that will keep us learning, keep us growing, keeping moving forward. So I think how to find it, there's many different, workshops and workbooks out there. The person who made this idea famous is a guy called Simon Sinek. You can look him up on, he's one of those, influencers. And he wrote a book called, I think it's called Start With Why, or It Starts With Why. And he just talks about, from a corporate perspective, most companies start with what they do. And then they talk about maybe how they do it. So their USP, how are they different? We do it blue or red, or we got this bell or this whistle or whatever, this special feature. But very few companies are able to articulate their why. Why do they do what they do? And the great companies out there, like Apple is a great example. If Apple flipped it around and did what everyone else did and started with what, their whole messaging would be, we make great computers, or we make, cool looking computers. But that's not what they did. They didn't start with the what or even the how. They started with why. It was to change the status quo. Right. It was to change the way we interact with our world. I mean, that's a very powerful, a very different way to start than with what you do. And when you have your why, the what will change. If Zensho tomorrow became a real estate agency or a coaching agency, that'd be okay. That's the how. The how will change. The how can change. The why would be consistent. The why would be the same. And I think it's really powerful. And you can look at it as purpose. I think one thing with purpose, I mean, if you put into Amazon and you put in something about finding my purpose, there's probably 1 million books on Amazon about that. And something I've come to believe is that your purpose is to be right where you are here and now, doing exactly what you're doing in the circumstances that you have. I think too many people, they are searching, they're always trying to escape from this. They're always trying to escape from this moment to some glorified, some fantasy in the future, some ideal moment in the future. And it's always about getting away from where they are. If I could just find my purpose, I'll be happy. If I could just do what I'm supposed to be doing, I'll be happy.
Get that
but
job,
it's always
get that house,
well, get that relationship,
get that relationship, whatever it might be.
Yeah. And it's always the grass is greener, right? It's always away from where they are, and they'll never get there. It's like a dog chasing its tail until the dog realizes it's already had the tail all along. And if you can just be present with your situation and actually appreciate where you are right now. If it's a shitty situation, of course you should do everything you can to try and change it. But first you have to acknowledge where you're at. And this goes for business, particularly entrepreneurship, particularly in recruitment. Acknowledge the situation where you're at now. Not where you want it to be, how you want it to be, what you wish it was like, how it is. And then you have to accept it. Accept the situation. Because when you argue with reality, you will lose every single time. Right? And trust me, I've tried to fight reality. I tried to do a few jabs. And, no, I lose every single time. Yeah. So when I say accepting reality, I don't mean being passive and putting up with a shitty situation. I don't mean just being a doormat for life to walk over you. I mean acknowledging, accepting this is what it is. Yeah. And then from that position of acceptance and acknowledgement, then you can respond. You can make decisions that are much more spontaneous, much more appropriate, and with less baggage, less mental baggage, less narrative surrounding them. You can respond much more appropriately to the situation. And that to me makes all the difference, whether it's business, whether it's martial arts, whether it's anything else. So often through that, when we do that, we start to the why seems to present itself. It naturally emerges. It's not something you have to try to find. It's not a logical game. Because if we just try to find out why, everyone thinks they're doing their purpose when they're happy. Oh, I got my new job. This is what I was born to do, until the moment they get a shitty boss and they realize, oh, this isn't my
This
purpose
is not
anymore.
my
Now it's
purpose
this
at
one.
all. Yeah.
Now it's this one. Now it's this one. Oh, she's the one for me. He's the one for me. Oh, not anymore. So it's never going to, you can't get it. You can't acquire it. It's not something outside of you. It's got to start here. And then, of course, you should do the things that you want to do, you think you should do in any moment. And then let go and see what happens. Let go and deal with what happens. That's the best recipe I have for life. Let go and let life flow. Yeah. Yes, you make decisions. Yes, you have to deal with ups and downs, but you do it from a much more present state, a much more aware state. And it makes, for me, it enriches life. It makes every meeting, every conversation, every experience so much more powerful, so much more vivid. You start to see things again like you're seeing them for the first time. And that is really, look, I'm human. I fall down short all the time. Kids are the best teachers. You think you know patience? Get a 5-year-old and you quickly realize how much work you still have to do. Anyway, as you can see, I'm blabbing on. I just get really excited about this stuff.
But this is exactly it. And one thing that I'm really quite interested in, and maybe you can share this as well, is sometimes you don't know what you know until you're faced with it, right? And so what I mean by that is often we don't recognize, and particularly for those of us that have spent really significant time in Japan or abroad, just how particular cultures or practices or just the things that we've learned until we're, a fish out of water and we're somewhere new. And you and I are both Australian, but I think in terms of Australians, we're probably not very good Australians. And I'd love to know now, kind of in this new chapter of bringing Zensho to Australia, is there anything that you've now that you're kind of, or not, is there anything, maybe I should rephrase too, what are some of the observations? Maybe it's not necessarily a learning yet, maybe it's still too early, maybe it's just simply an observation. What are some of those observations that you've had coming back to Australia that you've recognized, I didn't even know that was a lesson in me until you were kind of, faced with it, particularly, dealing with either, speaking to people, finding talent, just in building that, in building your new business. I'd love to hear a little bit more about just those observations that of maybe those lessons that you had from Japan that you didn't even know you had.
Yeah, well, I'm still. I mean, it's only been a few months since I got back, so it's been interesting. I mean, less so on the business side with regards to Australia because we're just getting going here. Right. But certainly on the personal level, while I was away for 25 years, and it's very likely I'll be moving back to Japan. The whole idea was to come here for maybe 2 years and give the kids an Aussie school and life experience. And,
yeah, exactly.
And then head back to Japan. But it's like we talked about earlier, this kind of reverse culture shock. I mean, even catching the bus, I didn't know how to do it. I was like, where do you buy a ticket? And just not knowing what to do or how to take public transport. And there's some things, you definitely, I definitely took for granted in Japan. I mean, all the things we know and love about Japanese culture, the considerate nature of people, obviously the safety in Japan, the friendliness, all of that is, again, Australia's wonderful and friendly people and all of that. But there's some things you definitely take for granted. I mean,
a little more rough around the edges.
Yeah, I mean, I was a taxi rank soon after the airport, and taxi was there in Sydney, and I'm waiting to, I'm standing at the door, waiting for the door to automatically open for me, and I just hear this voice from the taxi driver scream at me, "Mate, you getting in or what?"
You'll be waiting all day, mate.
Like, well, I'm not in Tokyo anymore. Had to open the door, apologize, bowing to the driver, of course. But so just little quirks like that. But more kind of from a cultural perspective, talking with recruiters in Australia. Interestingly, the majority of the the stories I hear are consistent with the stories I hear from recruiters in Japan.
Mm-hmm.
There are no news stories.
People are people.
We're all
Yeah.
people are people, and we just all want to get on. We all want to create a life for ourselves, and on some level, we want to pursue our why, whether we know what that is yet or not. We all just want to be at peace with ourselves and with our relationships, and not have to have so much anxiety. And I think, particularly with this COVID situation, the levels of anxiety have gone through the roof. And I feel my job as CEO of the business is very much one of a coach, and to really, again, help people navigate these waters. And it's something we do together. I don't have all the answers, and I certainly wouldn't want to have them. Everyone is different, but I find that through communication, through talking about people's situations, understanding their fears, understanding their perspective from the situation, often just through discussion, it can open up opportunities for people to see things they may not have considered before. Again, not totally, didn't answer your question at all about the changes of the lessons I've learned. I think the lessons, actually, well, put it this way, coming to Australia, it really does bring all the lessons I've kind of embodied from martial arts training really to the core, because in a sense, it's like coming to a new ring. It's like coming to a new arena.
No question.
Your opponent is everything. It's a different way you have to approach things. And again, if I came here with my preconceived ideas on how things are based on how they used to be when I lived here, or should be, or how they are in Japan, or whatever, I'm going to suffer. Again, I'm going to suffer when I argue with reality. And so I have to be open and responsive and actually deal with the situation as it is. And the more I can do that, and it's a work in progress always, and I'm always falling short, but the more I can do that, the easier, the more I'm able to flow. And for me, it's about flow. If I can flow, things are generally go much more smoothly.
And Robin, before you wrap up, is there something about Zensho, or in the process of building Zensho, about the Zensho way, that we haven't covered today that you'd like to share?
No, I think we've had a pretty good, and thank you for allowing me to get all this stuff out, because I know I was taking the conversation all over the place, but it's, you could hopefully you can appreciate that for me,
you have to come
business,
back.
martial arts, philosophy, life, entrepreneurship, it's all one and the same. The principles are interchangeable. And I've just tried to set up Zensho in a way that can grow and can move like a living organism, and not something that's rigid, but it has structure. The scaffolding there to support people on their journey, but it's their journey. And I wanted to create this structure that was going to be supportive, but not restrictive. And the result being, first and foremost, the ability for our people to advance their lives and their goals in life. And of course, secondary to that, and equally important, to make sure we give a fantastic level of service to those that we serve, our clients and our customers and our candidates, etc. And so far, so good. We've had ups and downs, but the people we attract are generally wonderful people, and they have big hearts, and they have a lot of courage, and they're just fun. It's fun to go into work every day and just see the people. Now it's online, and just to get together, and who knows what story is going to come out of each day.
Yeah, and Robin, on that note, please don't be a stranger to the Business Karaoke podcast. Please come back anytime.
I would love to.
And there's so
Anytime.
much more that we'd love to dig deeper on. For me, a real takeaway was that you're in business for yourself, but not by yourself. And your energy, the way that you built your business, the community of people that you have around you is really a testament to how authentic that is for you. So thank you so much. And I hope everybody else who's listening enjoyed this as much as I did. And I think everyone should just look out for Robin in the next couple of weeks, because I'm sure he'll be back anyway.
I would love to be back, and I just love talking about this. You are a wonderful host, and gave me the opportunity to blab on about the things that are important to me, and hopefully some interest to your viewers as well. But thank you so much. I'd love to be back.